She landed like a myth. The Vayari dropcraft hissed through the storm-thick sky of Tau Cygni 4, its wings slicing vapor trails across the dense clouds that hung like bruises over the jungle below. Lightning cracked sideways, and the machine's hull shimmered with deflector flares, casting pulses of blue across the canopy. It was the kind of entrance meant to remind the universe who owned its silence. Commander Eli stepped out before the thrusters cooled. Her boots sank half an inch into the spongy earth, alive with bioluminescent algae that flared pink underfoot. The sensors in her armor translated ambient data into a running heads-up display. Oxygen 87%, gravity adjustable, fauna mostly non-venomous, but prone to spitting. Her long ears twitched as her helmet auto-adjusted, filtering the heavy ion mist that clung to everything like wet regret. She scanned the clearing, empty, save for the faint smell of burnt circuitry and abandonment. They had run. They always ran. Humans had an excellent sense of self-preservation, albeit usually expressed through screaming and terrible aim. Her orders were simple: locate any remaining assets, assess potential resistance, neutralize as needed. The usual cleanse and scrub. No survivors meant no surprises, except a shape moved. It wasn't stealthy, quite the opposite, really. A human, male, unarmored, unsupervised, ambled into view, pushing what looked like the carcass of a dismembered satellite on a squeaky-wheeled cart. He wore a half-zip maintenance suit, smeared in engine grease, and a patch that read, Jamie, with the I dotted by a smiley face. He looked up at her, paused, and then waved. Hey, if you're here to vaporize me, can you wait till I fix the comm relay? I've got a bet going on whether the station AI will become sentient or just turn into a toaster again. Eli's plasma rifle hummed with readiness. Her visor flared red. She had a dozen reflex protocols for this situation, none of which involved entertaining domestic appliance jokes. You remain behind, she said flatly. Everyone else evacuated. Yeah, he said, returning to his repairs. I was hoping they'd leave me the good coffee. They didn't, so now it's personal. Eli stared. Humans were erratic, but this one was borderline suicidal, or oblivious. Both conditions had the same symptoms. You're not afraid of me. Jamie squinted up at her, one eye closed against the sun breaking through the clouds like a reluctant apology. You've got a weapon the size of a canoe, and ears that would make my dog jealous. But no, not afraid. Should I be? Her grip faltered, just slightly, just long enough for her weapon to drop a degree. Her gauntlet recalibrated automatically. It wasn't a misfire, but her pulse was off, faster, inconsistent. That's, unwise, she said. Yeah, well, wisdom's overrated. Like pants. He gestured down. These technically qualify, but only because command won't let me walk around in shorts. She didn't know what to do with that information. The silence stretched between them like a data loop waiting to fail. The last time someone looked her in the eye without fear, she dislocated their jaw in 3 directions. And yet, here was Jamie, grinning like someone who hadn't realized the universe wanted him extinct. Her fingers twitched, just a tremor. Likely the climate, or more dangerously, not. He held out a steaming metal cup. Tea? Might be slightly radioactive. Gives it character. Eli didn't move, but her hands were shaking. The tea tasted like regret filtered through an old radiator. Eli sipped it anyway. She sat rigid on the corner of a broken transport container, its edges warped from some long-past skirmish, or possibly, according to Jamie, an unfortunate experiment involving quantum toast. His explanation had included the words space-time jam and butter dimension, which she mentally filed under Terran humor. Dangerous, possibly contagious. Jamie squatted across from her, elbows on his knees, sipping from a mismatched ceramic mug shaped like a cat in a space helmet. The cat had a jetpack. The jetpack was on fire. You don't talk much, he said between slurps, which is cool. Strong, silent type. Very cinematic. But if we're going to share apocalypse beverages, you should at least tell me your name. She hesitated. Vayari protocol dictated limited disclosure to civilian species during occupation procedures. Names especially held weight. Rank, purpose, heritage. Eli, she said finally. Eli, Jamie repeated, nodding. Nice. Kinda sounds like a constellation. Or an allergy medication. Ask your doctor if Eli is right for you. Her ears twitched. It was hard to catalog the effect this human had on her. He wasn't biologically remarkable. Average musculature, light sun damage on exposed skin, elevated caffeine levels. But there was something destabilizing in the way he looked at her, like he was perpetually waiting for a punchline and might be okay even if it hurt. Her armor pinged. Low-level seismic reading, 10 kilometers east. No immediate threat. She ignored it. So, Jamie continued, plucking a piece of fried something from a foil packet, what brings a fully armed alien goddess to my humble, mildly radioactive outpost? Need spare parts? Trying to recruit the local idiot population? Because we're full up. I checked. I'm not recruiting, she said. This planet is under Vayari control. Your presence here is unauthorized. Well, technically, he said, licking orange powder off his fingers, my lease still has 2 weeks, and the landlord's dead, which probably makes me king. Eli's visor dimmed slightly, indicating a stress spike in her neural interface. She breathed, not out of annoyance, not entirely. It was something like recalibration. He pointed to the sky, now deepening into evening purples as the planet's twin moons began their slow rise. You know, before everyone bailed, I asked Command what they were running from. They said, incoming Sindari incursion, but didn't bother to mention who the Sindari were. Just packed up and left. Real morale builders, that crew. We are not Sindari, Eli said. We dismantled them 3 systems ago. Oh, so you're like the guys who beat the bad guys? No. Cool. That's not ominous at all. He stood and stretched, spine cracking audibly. Well, if you're going to obliterate me, do it after dinner. I made pasta. And I use the term pasta loosely. It was originally a structural insulation foam, but I boiled the guilt out of it. She watched him walk back toward the half-broken building that served as his kitchen laboratory sleep zone. A rusted sign over the door read, Jamie's House of Questionable Engineering. And something inside was ticking like a countdown no one had bothered to stop. Eli followed, not because of curiosity, not because of orders, but because her hands still hadn't stopped trembling. Dinner was served on what Jamie claimed were antique ceramic plates, but what Eli's scanners identified as pressure-washed satellite dishes. The pasta was molecularly confused. It changed texture every 3 bites, ranging from al dente to something that tried to fight back. Still, it was warm, it didn't melt her taste sensors, and it came with a side of pickled something that might have once been vegetable adjacent. In short, edible. Just barely. Jamie, unfazed, slurped his foam noodle hybrid and waved his fork with the confidence of a man who once survived eating a pre-warp cafeteria burrito. I call it pasta vortex, because no one escapes without consequence. Eli chewed in silence. Her internal diagnostics suggested her system would neutralize the chemical anomalies within the hour, but she made a mental note to reconfigure her stomach filters, just in case Jamie decided to get creative with dessert. The structure they sat in was equal parts chaos and ingenuity. Twisted coils of cabling ran across the ceiling like jungle vines. Dangling tools swung gently from their hooks in rhythm with the station's heartbeat. The walls were plastered with neon sticky notes written in messy looping handwriting. Equations, circuit sketches, doodles of dinosaurs piloting mechs. On one corner, someone had written in bold red ink, "If it starts hissing, run." Underneath, "Unless it's the kettle." Eli's gaze paused on a worn hollow photo stuck to the wall with faded adhesive. A human woman smiled into the lens, her eyes soft, her hair caught mid-motion by wind. Jamie's features were unmistakable beside her, younger, less lined by solitude. "My sister," he said without prompting. "She left with the others, probably floating in some escape pod 2 systems over, arguing with the onboard AI. I stayed behind to finish a few things. She called me stupid." He took another bite. "She's not wrong." Eli said nothing. Her culture didn't teach grief as an emotion. It was classified as inefficiency. but she recognized the echo in his voice. The spaces left behind. Jamie leaned back in his rickety chair, balancing on two legs like a man who had made peace with gravity's betrayal. So, what do your people do when they're not out conquering? Big fans of karaoke? Intergalactic bake-offs? We observe, Eli said slowly. We document. And if necessary, we act. By act, you mean vaporize. If necessary, she repeated. He nodded sagely. Classic diplomacy. There was a long pause filled only by the subtle ticking of something overhead. Eli traced the source, an old environmental stabilizer, patched together with more hope than science. It was due to fail in approximately 36 hours, unless the coolant was rerouted through one of Jamie's backup systems. She logged the variables, calculated 3 potential solutions, and said nothing. Instead, she stood and wandered toward the back room, her curiosity outweighing protocol. Jamie didn't stop her. Beyond the curtain of cables, she found his workshop, part repair bay, part museum of salvage technology. A cracked star-core regulator sat beside a fossilized bird skull. A tangle of microfusion rods flickered softly in a repurposed fish tank. One corner housed a half-complete machine, sleek and curved like a sleeping beast. It pulsed faintly, its innards a blend of Terran tech and something else. Something older. Familiar. Eli stepped closer. Ah, Jamie said, entering behind her. My side project. I call it the possibly a portal or a blender. Still waiting on some parts to find out which. Her hand hovered above the strange alloy paneling. It wasn't Terran. It was Vyari. Old tech, deep archive. Forbidden to share. Illegal to use. How did you get this? She asked sharply. Jamie raised both hands. Hey, I just dig through the trash the universe leaves behind. This baby came in on a trade barge full of black market radio parts and space ferrets. I honestly thought it was a jukebox at first. Eli's eyes narrowed. You're not supposed to have this. Jamie shrugged. I'm not supposed to do a lot of things. But here I am making spaghetti out of insulation foam and trying to make a transdimensional blender that won't explode. Eli backed away from the machine, her instincts prickling. If this tech activated, if it drew Vyari attention, it would mean eradication. For both of them. You need to destroy it. He blinked. Really? That's a bit dramatic. What if it is a blender? If it is, it will blend our atoms into dust. So, high-speed setting then? She didn't laugh. Not exactly, but the corner of her mouth twitched. Her hands, still shaking softly, dropped to her sides. The war was far away, but something else, perhaps more dangerous, was beginning to awaken right here. The possibility that this idiotic, resilient human might not just survive her, he might change her. Jamie was trying to tape a toaster to the ceiling. Eli watched him from across the room, arms folded, one eyebrow raised so high it could have qualified as an antenna. The toaster, a dented chrome relic from a pre-fusion age, was rigged with a mess of wires and blinking lights, none of which seemed designed to make toast. This, he said, stepping back to admire the precarious monstrosity, is my new counter-surveillance unit, the Toast Eye 9000. It watches the watchers, and sometimes makes bagels. Does it function? That depends, Jamie said, climbing down from the ladder. Define function. If by that you mean, does it occasionally beep and frighten the mice? Then yes, gloriously. Eli tilted her head. You've weaponized a breakfast appliance. I prefer the term strategic repurposing. She said nothing, which in her language meant, I am calculating the probability of this exploding in the next 24 hours. Outside, the violet skies of Tau Cygni 4 flickered with thin lightning sheets. A storm was brewing, not the kind made of wind and ion currents, though that too, but the kind that traveled through coded frequencies and Vyari black channels. Her internal systems had picked up the anomaly hours ago, a spectral ping buried in static, pulsing at regular intervals. The signature wasn't civilian. Eli had scrubbed it from her HUD twice, hoping it was a relic transmission. A ghost. But ghosts didn't repeat every 86 minutes with military precision. Someone was coming. She kept it to herself. Instead, she leaned against the wall as Jamie prattled on about his latest project. rebuilding a navigational array using scrap from a derelict cargo drone and what he called a mildly cursed weather balloon. He showed her a diagram that looked more like a spider had gotten into a crayon box than an actual schematic. "I'm planning to launch it tomorrow," he said. "If it doesn't implode or open a portal to the spice dimension." "That's not a dimension," Eli said. "Not yet, but I have dreams." He winked. She didn't know what to do with that wink. It made her feel like her skin was vibrating at the wrong frequency. She turned away and walked outside, pretending to inspect the perimeter sensors. The air was heavy with ozone and crushed leaves. Somewhere in the distance, a native beast let out a mournful howl, something between a roar and a hiccup. Eli scanned the horizon, her ears twitching with micro-adjustments. The transmission pulse had come again. Closer now, less buried. Her people had found her, and Jamie. She returned inside. He was still tinkering, cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by wires, tools, and what appeared to be a melted ice cream cone made of circuit paste. "Jamie." He looked up, startled by the shift in her tone. "Uh-oh, that's the voice you use before issuing plasma ultimatums. They're coming." "Who?" "My people. IHFYI command." Jamie's eyes widened. "Oh, that's bad, right? For me, I mean. You, I assume, get invited to dinner and polite interrogations. They'll classify you as a contaminant." "Well, that's just rude." Eli moved to the workbench, activated a mini holomap. Her fingers danced across the interface. "We have 12 hours, maybe less. They'll assume I've gone rogue, that you've compromised me." "Have you?" She paused, looked at him. "Not entirely." He smirked. "Progress." Eli began moving tools into a crate, assessing power reserves, defensive protocols. Jamie followed her, trying to look useful and mostly tripping over wires. "You don't have to stay," she said without looking up. "You can run. They might not pursue a fleeing civilian." "Yeah," he said quietly. "But then who's going to fix the toaster?" She stopped. The silence between them buzzed with something electric. Not fear, not yet, but a strange, reluctant camaraderie. A bond formed in the quiet hours between pasta disasters and half-formed goodbyes. "Then we prepare," she said. Jamie picked up a wrench, held it like it was a sword. "Shall we install more kitchen appliances on the ceiling?" Eli blinked, then nodded, deadpan. "Start with the blender." Eli spent the night reinforcing defenses. She had no illusions about the outcome. If a IHFYI retrieval unit was inbound, their options were limited to bad, worse, and obliteration in slow motion. Still, she worked with precision, setting up pulse traps, reprogramming the sensor grid, even rigging the old water purification tower with a destabilized grav field coil. When Jamie asked if it would explode, she said, "Only if someone breathes near it." He gave it a wide berth and named it Larry. Larry hummed ominously in the distance. Jamie, meanwhile, was building decoys. Not conventional decoys. That would have been too easy. Instead, he fabricated a series of inflatable humanoids using leftover weather balloon material and old jumpsuits. They looked like drunken parade floats. One wore a colander for a hat. Another held a sign that read, "Not Jamie, totally someone else." "I figure if your people are watching from orbit," he said, wiping sweat from his forehead, "maybe we can convince them I've been replaced by a cult of balloon enthusiasts. Statistically unlikely, but not impossible." Eli didn't comment. She was busy rewiring the outpost backup generator into a localized electromagnetic scrambler. It would fry unshielded sensors within a 100-meter radius, including probably Jamie's coffee maker. She decided not to mention that part. As dawn crept in, casting long violet shadows across the clearing, the two of them stood side by side in front of their makeshift stronghold. The walls shimmered faintly from layered shield emitters, and the roof now boasted what Jamie called a highly aggressive satellite dish that had once belonged to a derelict karaoke bar. "You know," Jamie said, sipping what he claimed was nutrient-rich tea but smelled suspiciously like melted mint gum, "for a deadly alien warrior, you're surprisingly good at arts and crafts." Eli looked down at her gauntlet, which now bore a crude sticker Jamie had slapped on earlier. A cartoon cat holding a plasma rifle. Beneath it, in uneven handwriting, "Pew Pew Meow." I allowed that for morale, she said. Of course. The mood shifted as her internal sensors pulsed a warning. Incoming atmospheric entry. Low signature. Cloaked. They're here, she said. Jamie didn't run. He only adjusted his goggles, checked the voltage on his toaster turret, and gave a resolute nod. From the jungle came the sound of something slicing air without touching it. Vayari plasma bikes, sleek and nearly silent. Moments later they appeared. Two scouts clad in armor more ceremonial than practical, followed by a third figure. Taller, broader, his armor darker and marked with command glyphs. His face was sharp, unreadable. Ears tapered like Eli's, but bearing gold rings that marked him as a purifier. Vor, Eli said under her breath. Jamie raised a hand in greeting. Welcome to Jamie's house of mild panic and slightly explosive hospitality. Can I interest you in a muffin trap? Vor's gaze swept over Jamie like he was something sticky found under a boot. This is the contaminant? I prefer unsanctioned local flavor, Jamie offered. Eli stepped forward. He's under my protection. You've disobeyed protocol. Your assignment is terminated. Return with us, and the tribunal may show leniency. She's not going anywhere, Jamie said. Eli's hand went to her sidearm. Slowly, Vor's lip curled. You're infected with sentiment. And you're still using outdated threat models, Eli said. We're not alone. She wasn't bluffing. She had sent a signal 2 nights ago, encoded, buried in the frequency band between weather patterns and microwave interference. A gamble. But she had a hunch not all Vayari agreed with extermination orders. A long pause. Vor tilted his head. You've changed. Eli stepped closer to Jamie, her shoulders squared. So have we. Behind them, Larry made a noise like a bubble about to burst. Jamie whispered, If Larry explodes, I'm blaming you. If Larry explodes, Eli muttered, we run. He grinned. Then we run together. The first shot wasn't fired. It sang. Vayari weapons didn't bark or thunder. They emitted harmonic discharges, pulses of subsonic resonance that folded space around them in brief, violent spirals. When Vor lifted his rifle and loosed a warning blast, the jungle behind Eli and Jamie curled like paper struck by invisible flame. Trees rippled, leaves shriveled. Somewhere a bird screamed and reconsidered its life choices. Jamie flinched. Okay, wow, that's aggressively musical. Eli didn't move. Her own rifle, sleek, matte, sleepless, was already warm in her hands. She didn't aim it yet, not quite. She stood between Vor and Jamie, her posture so steady it made the very air reconsider escalation. This is not a battlefield, she said, voice low. Vor dismounted, his armor hissing as it adjusted to local gravity. It wasn't. You made it one. Behind him, the 2 scouts spread out in formation. Their weapons stayed low, but not low enough. Jamie reached slowly into his coat and retrieved what looked like a very confused salad spinner. Eli gave him a sharp look. He whispered, It's rigged with a proximity coil and 3 magnets. Might buy us 10 seconds. Might also make soup. Wait for my signal, she replied. He gave a tiny thumbs up. Vor's gaze flicked between them, his jaw tense. You were our sharpest blade, Eli. Now you hide behind primitives and mockery. Jamie gasped theatrically. Wow, harsh. I prefer the term irregular genius with charming hair. Eli ignored him, her eyes locked with Vor's. I have not defected, but I have seen something different, something possible. A single human? Vor scoffed. You'd risk your rank, your identity, for this? She didn't answer, but Jamie did. Hey, I get it. I'm flattered. I've got nice shoulders. Vor raised his rifle again. Eli's hands tensed, but before anyone fired, the sky changed. It was subtle at first, a shimmer, a sound like distant chimes underwater. Then streaks of blue light knifed across the cloud bank above, converging into a single point high in the atmosphere. The air pressure shifted. All the instruments Jamie had scattered across the outpost started pinging, vibrating, or just plain panicking. Eli's comm lit up. A signal, heavily encrypted, bouncing through 5 relay satellites. She opened it on a private channel. Only one word came through. Received. She smiled. Just a little, Vor noticed. What have you done? I gave others the chance to choose, she said. The sound that followed was not thunder, but it carried the same promise. A sleek vessel broke through the clouds, Vayari in origin, but modified. Eli recognized its design immediately. A dissident class cutter. Illegal. Supposedly decommissioned. A ghost ship. It wasn't a fleet. It was just one. But it was enough. The cutter hovered overhead, silent save for the low hum of its fusion drives. Its shadow fell over Vor's team. They froze. The ship's insignia, a broken chain wrapped in orbit rings, flared to life on its underbelly. Eli lowered her rifle. They came, she said softly. Jamie leaned toward her. So, friends of yours, former defectors, outcasts, engineers, thinkers, fighters who questioned the directive. Vor turned his weapon on her. You brought rebels into sovereign space. You brought judgment, she replied. I brought options. For a breathless moment, no one moved. Then Vor snarled and signaled the retreat. He knew better than to fight with only 3, against one loyalist commander in a cutter full of ghosts. The scouts vanished into the trees with a shimmer. Vor followed last, his glare a promise. Jamie exhaled. That went surprisingly not explodey. Eli holstered her weapon. Give it time. The cutter began its descent, kicking up leaves and debris. Jamie threw an arm over his eyes as the dust storm hit. So what now? We run? Eli looked at him, really looked at him. His face was smudged with soot, his eyes bright with defiance and a kind of fragile hope. No, she said. We build. He grinned despite the rising wind. Do I get a title? Co-founder? Ambassador of SAS? Head of improvised explosives and breakfast machinery. Sounds about right. And above them, the future landed with a whir and a promise. The jungle had stopped holding its breath. For the first time since her boots had touched the soil of Tau Sigma 4, Eli felt the world exhale around her. Not in surrender, but in something quieter, readier. She stood on the ridge overlooking the rebuilt outpost, now strung with makeshift antennas, humming solar collectors, and, for some reason, 6 garden gnomes with repurposed laser eyes. Jamie's contribution, obviously. One of them wore her discarded shoulder plate. Another had been nicknamed Admiral Toast. Below, the cutter ship rested like a sleeping leviathan, its hull patched and scorched from a dozen long journeys through unauthorized systems. The rebels, no, allies, she corrected, moved among its hatches and panels with practiced ease. Vayari, who had stepped off the path years ago, now returning not as soldiers, but as architects of something new. Eli touched her gauntlet, cycling through the last transmissions from high command. Warnings, threats, then silence. The kind that meant they hadn't figured out how to respond yet, or they were regrouping. But even that didn't make her hands tremble anymore. Jamie sat cross-legged beside a field console, soldering something that sparked more than seemed healthy. His hair was in disarray, his sleeves rolled to the elbow, and a pair of goggles perched lopsided on his forehead like they were trying to escape. A bit of soot streaked his cheek, and a nanobot was nibbling at the hem of his coat. He let it, claimed it was bonding. Let me guess, she said, stepping into the light. You've installed another appliance into the comm array. Don't worry, he said, grinning. This one only makes pancakes. That's worse. He offered her the tool. She took it, knelt beside him, and began correcting the polarity he'd reversed. Again. He watched her fingers move, more deft now than when they'd first met. Less rigid, less at war. So, he said, we're a rebellion now. No, she replied, we're a beginning. Jamie leaned back and looked at the sky. Do beginnings usually involve this much wiring and caffeine? Only the successful ones. They worked in silence for a while, surrounded by the low hum of machines and the faint laughter of the others. The crew had accepted her, slowly, then completely. She wasn't just the commander anymore. She was the catalyst, the one who'd crossed the line and made a stand. Not for conquest, not for victory, but for a strange, infuriating human who offered tea and hope in equal measure. Eli had changed. Not in the obvious ways. Her armor was still fitted, her training sharp, her aim unerring. But her posture no longer braced for betrayal. Her voice no longer carried weight like a weapon. And most striking of all, her hands were steady. That night she stood alone at the edge of the camp, watching the stars unfurl. Jamie joined her, holding 2 mugs of something that smelled faintly of herbs and circuit glue. "Peace offering," he said, handing her one. "Am I supposed to drink it?" "Not unless you want hallucinations of singing frogs." She sipped anyway. "You never told me why," she said quietly. "Why you stayed. Everyone else ran." Jamie looked out at the dark horizon, where the jungle blinked with bioluminescent life, and distant thunder rolled like a reminder. "Because I'd already lost enough," he said, "and running doesn't fix anything. It just means you're far away when things get better." Eli turned to him. "Do you think things can get better?" "I didn't," he said, "until you didn't vaporize me." They stood in the silence together, not needing to speak, not anymore. The bond between them wasn't fragile. It had been forged in threats, in laughter, in broken machines and unlikely survival. It was ridiculous, improbable, and utterly real. The next day, the first encoded broadcast went out. Not from a capital, not from a throne, from a jungle, from an outpost, from 2 minds that dared to imagine a third path. The message was simple. You are not alone. We are building something better, and we are not afraid. Somewhere in the stars, someone heard it and paused.